Okay, hello everybody. Good morning, good afternoon. I make that 10 o'clock on the Pacific coast and 1 in the PM over here on the East Coast and whatever it is elsewhere in the world. So thank you all for joining. Today we are going to do the next in a series of UMT 360's webinars. Today we are talking about application portfolio rationalization. So hopefully you will enjoy this. All right, so a quick little bit about UMT 360, first of all, for those of you that don't know us, or even those of you that do. So we are experts in strategic portfolio management, but what does strategic portfolio management mean? Because it means, I think, a bigger thing than a lot of people think it means. It covers traditional portfolio management, project management, it covers architecture, it covers business and enterprise architecture. All of those things, all of strategy to execution sits in this space, and we cover the whole space. We have a framework called the VIC framework. I'll talk about that briefly. We are a Microsoft partner. We have been doing this stuff a long time. We've been doing enterprise architecture for 30 years. We've been doing traditional portfolio and project management for 30 years. We've been doing this stuff a long time. And now we've brought it all together with what we think is a very compelling vision for the whole strategy to execution picture. Okay, so it's all about business agility. How do we get to business agility? And I know this isn't directly application portfolio rationalization or APRAC, but it plays into it. Rationalizing your IT and application portfolios are a fundamental part of describing and understanding your connected enterprise. And so we see two of the main barriers or obstacles to achieving business agility. One is having a disconnected enterprise, not really understanding how all the pieces fit together. And we will talk about that quite a lot today, because portfolio rationalization relies on understanding how the pieces fit together. That's probably going to be about half of the webinar today, is talking about what the pieces mean. Also, strategic alignment. Clearly, you need dynamic blueprint of the entire enterprise. You need to know what everything means from everything else's point of view in order to have a clear path forward. That's not the subject of the webinar today. It's just a little bit of background for you. So again, business agility is the key. We need to respond to that. I'm not going to dwell on these things. Those of you that have seen our presentations before will know these are slides that we often show. Anybody that wants more information on this, please let us know. And we will be doing other webinars that go deep into these areas. This is just a little bit of place setting for today. One more thing I'll say on this subject, it does take a village. And our very next webinar is going to be all about taking a village. For today, we'll simply say that on this slide here, you see multiple roles, all of whom need to collaborate and contribute to the connected enterprise, to business agility. We're concentrating on the purple area to the right, and that is the connect part of our VIC framework. This is the business architects, enterprise architects, data folks, IT portfolio managers, but everybody supports each other. It's all one big picture. So just brief word on tooling. Again, it's not a tooling webinar at all. We will be using our Enterprise Connect tool to demonstrate certain techniques and certain features today. But as a company, we provide a product suite called 360 Strategic Portfolio Manager, which consists of two modules. Portfolio Insights is the traditional UMT 360 tooling that has been around for a long time in this space, Gartner Magic Quadrant player and all of that. And Enterprise Connect is the business and enterprise architecture part of the tooling. Application portfolio rationalization plays on both of these tools, or it uses both of these tool areas. Traditionally, we've done it more in the Enterprise Connect side, but we're now finding there is a lot more connection across into Portfolio Insights, and we'll talk about that as we move forward a bit. Okay, so the title of today's webinar was 6 steps to mastering portfolio rationalization, and very loosely, those 6 steps are: first of all, we've got to understand what application actually means, because it means many things to many people. We'll go a bit deep into that. Fitting the applications, or fitting the concept of applications into the rest of the connected enterprise. So this is before we actually look at the details of what any applications are. The third area, the third step, is really defining everything we need to know about an application or any other asset. Now, we're concentrating on applications today, but this could equally apply to information assets. It could equally apply to rationalizing process or whatever, but we're talking about applications today. And characteristics, that's an important thing. We'll go deep on that. Attributive values of applications, what you need to, all the details that you need to know about applications. So we're halfway through these 6 steps before actually looking at a single application. The remaining 3 steps are pulling all the applications together, analyzing them, assessing them, rationalizing what's there, understanding how things play against each other. Then we get into road mapping and how do you basically take what you've learned from the rationalization and apply it to change, apply it to the future, and then do it again, rinse and repeat. We'll talk about that at the end when we start talking about the bigger picture, which is application portfolio management. So apparatus is what we're talking about today, application portfolio rationalization. The bigger APM is going to be the subject of another webinar, and it's going to be an area that we'll go much deeper into. Okay, so let's start with step 1. What makes it an application? This guy looks pretty confused. He looks confused on every webinar we do. There's no pleasing this guy. So is it an application because we built it? Or is it an application because somebody went out and bought it? Is it because it serves a business purpose? That's quite a useful one, actually. Or because IT just told us we had to use it? Is it because it's something that I built in my spare time using Access on my desktop or whatever? That's aging me, isn't it? Sorry. Or is it because it's just a spreadsheet, but actually we run half of the company on it? That, by the way, is a real example from multiple folks over the years. People do run entire companies on Excel, and I'm sure some of you have seen it. Is it because it's something we're planning to use for the future? That's a difficult one. What makes it an application? Is it an application before it actually exists, or is it an architectural target? Is it a system for future use? That's something that can be debated. Is it because it's a module of our ERP? Well, if we look at industry definitions, typically, generally, an application is defined as a software program that runs on a computer. But really, at the end of the day, the important thing is it doesn't exactly matter what you say an application is, anything like as much as it matters that everybody in your organization has the same definition of application. You need to be able to call an apple an apple. You need to be able to say, this is what an application is and this is what an application is not. That is absolutely crucial. First thing is to have a well-defined view of what an application means to your organization. Then you know what you're measuring. Otherwise, it's a very, very slippery slope. So before we do anything further, I want to do a first poll. Mr. Pollster, if you could put the poll up, please. So what I want to know is, in your company, in your organization, how well do you think you really know your applications? And we've got a little continuum here like we always have with these things. So at the top, the sort of high-flying answer is we know everything about them. We know what they are, we know what they do, we know how they support our business, we know where they're tripping us up, we know where they're getting in the way of things, we know where there's all sorts of issues with them. Second answer, well, we know how much they cost, how much we're spending on them, generally what technologies they use, and we know when those technologies are going to be sunset by the vendors, so we may need to move off them, or if they're cost products, we know when we're losing use of those applications altogether and they need to be replaced. Next option is, well, we've got a spreadsheet that has some stuff about these applications, or we've got a single SharePoint list where it's all pulled together, or it's in a repository that is sparsely populated. And then the last answer, which honestly is the one that I see most out there in the world, is we got lots of spreadsheets and we got lots of SharePoint lists. Clearly, that's not as good as having it all in one place, because these things can contradict. They can have got gaps in them. There's no real cohesive picture. So I'll give you a couple of minutes just to have a think on that and give us some responses, and then we can move on. It's just I'd like to start with a little bit of an understanding of what everybody. Okay. All right. Thank you, folks. Appreciate your input, and we'll revisit that at the end when we see what, in our opinion, you should be doing about applications. It'll be interesting to just see if it looks differently. All right. So now let's look at, where do applications fit into your world? So I said before we start looking at any details about applications, before we say we've got 750 or we've got 12 and we spent $10 million on them, or they're all based on code written 30 years ago, before we do any of that, we need to understand what we call the metadata, the things that, how applications fit with other objects in your enterprise, in your architecture. So this is a very simple example, it's a simplistic example actually, but I just want to make the point. This is a view from 360 Enterprise Connect of a very simple application portfolio makeup. This is not, again, talking about any individual application, it's talking about applications as a concept. And we're saying applications can be grouped into application portfolios. They can be based on technologies. They can be owned or stewarded or managed or maintained by stakeholders. They support business capabilities. They may be used in business processes and value stages within value streams. They may support business functions if you have a functional view of your business, and they're generally supplied by vendors unless they're all built in-house. So it's just a really simple picture of the sort of things that you may want to consider when you're saying, what do my applications look like? There's a lot more things you could put in here. You could go into the information domain, for example, and say, what data do they process? What business rules apply to them? Various things. What products and services do they relate to? So this picture, as I say, it's just an example, and it can grow. So that's the first thing we can say about applications is, what other things are they connected to? The next thing we can ask about applications is, what are they made up of? What are the details that sit underneath them? And you'll notice there's a heading up here, survey question. The reason that's there, I'll talk about this a bit later on, but in 360 Enterprise Connect, we use built-in surveys to crowdsource this level of detail across an organization. It's a very efficient way of gathering this information. But so, for example, you might want to know, how is access to data or functions managed? How much do you spend on applications? That's a common one. How much do you spend supporting them? Can this be demised, do you think? What's our CapEx on it? All of these things are completely flexible, and you can decide or be advised, or however you want to do it, what the things are that are important to you. What's underneath all that is, you need to know what the outcome is. Why are you looking to rationalize your applications? Is it just because somebody said there's too many of them, there's too many notes, like they said in Amadeus? We simply need to get rid of some. That's a really bad way to do portfolio rationalization. Again, I've seen that with clients over the years. We've got 1,000 applications and we want to have 500. Which 500 do you want? Oh, we want the 500 that's going to save us the most money. And if you only look at it from the point of view of what are the elements that make up the application, it's part of it, but it's not all of it. What are the things that make up the portfolio? It's not just how expensive is the application, how much, I mean, you could have an application that costs you $5 million a year, is running on old technology, is creaking at the seams, but you're making 25 million on it a year through the business that it generates. So you've got to take that into consideration. Where does it fit in the business? Then you've got the technology risk of what we just talked about. It's on old technology, it's creaking. So clearly it's a candidate for being demised. All of these things have to play in together. And the way that you get to this list of questions to ask is you start from the outcome, start with the end in mind. If the outcome you want is to reduce your technology risk, then there's one set of questions you've asked. If the outcome you want is you want to achieve regulatory compliance, or you want to migrate to the cloud, or you want to close 3 of your legacy data centers, or whatever it may be. And in reality, it's going to be a collection of those things. It's going to be a compromise between those different levers that you can pull, or levers. And that's how we come up with this list of questions. We have a sort of standard list of questions that we can start folks off with. We can advise on this, but typically you'll get this. But again, my point is, this is all the homework. This is the heavy lift you have to do first in order to make the actual portfolio rationalization exercise easy and straightforward. And people don't normally do this. They charge straight into, I want to reduce my number, I want to reduce my cost, I want to change my technologies, whatever it may be, without thinking this stuff through. So important. I probably should have clicked that first, because that's basically what I've been saying. Anyway, so there's it in somebody else's words, i.e. mine that I wrote yesterday. Okay. So what we've got now is we've defined what an application is. The properties are what do we need to know about an application, what's important about it, and the associations, which is what are the other things that applications are related to. And again, we're only looking for the important ones. We might not care if it's related to 15 different servers at this stage, because we're going to look at some more fundamental things like, does it give us fundamental business value? Does it support does it support business capabilities that we're looking to increase our investment in, as opposed to if you've got applications which are built on good technology and they're very efficient and they cost very little to run, but they're supporting a capability that your corporate strategy says you are going to be divesting over the next year, probably no point in investing in the next version of that application if it's going to have no purpose once that business capability has been divested, or that business unit, or whatever it may be. So there are a lot of dimensions that all come into this, and they all have a place for everything, and with apologies to Radiohead, everything in its right place. Now what this is about is saying, once that metadata, everything we've talked about so far, all the homework has been done, now you've got a set of nice boxes. That's where you can start putting things. You start actually gathering the content now. This is where you want to say, pull together my list of 1,500 applications from my spreadsheets, from my CMDBs, pull them out of ServiceNow, pull them out of Remedy, wherever they may be, and get them all into one place. And then you can start doing work on them. Then you can start analyzing them, apples for apples. You can start consistently looking at them and seeing what's there. Hopefully that's all making sense so far. Haven't seen anybody shouting about it in the comments, so we shall move on. All right, time to have a look at what some of this stuff actually looks like, put some meat on the bones, as they say. So if I jump across into 360 Enterprise Connect, what I want to start with here is just show you a little bit about how we represent applications in this software. So this is a banking generic demonstration database that we use for product demos and things. This is all just sort of neutral flat data in here. If I go in and I'll pick one of these applications, we'll pick one called Chatter, for example. We have some basic information about the application. And by the way, in 360 Enterprise Connect, every object is represented like this, everything in the business domain, in the information domain, all of them. So what you're seeing here is not unique to applications, it's just we're looking at applications today. So this is a list of applications that are in this particular client data set, or this demo data set. So let's start there actually. If I just click on there, we get a list of all the applications, we get a list, you can search this, you can go into it and do whatever you want to in there. So if we go and look at one application in detail, this application called Chatter, we have a slow internet connection because I'm broadcasting to lots of people. And apart from that, we have a basic description of it up here. It may have versions because applications can have versions. And then down here, you get into the meta model I was talking about. Now, there's a list here of a lot of things that applications can connect to. Don't be overwhelmed by this because this, again, is a demo environment and we're demonstrating lots of different scenarios in here. You can cut this down to say just specific things that you're interested in. So this list here shows all the things an application can be related to. That's the metadata, that's setting up the boxes. What's in this box is this application called Chatter is related to a microservice, which is called MS1. Brilliant, great name. It appears on a couple of value stages in different value streams. And it appears supplied by a vendor and various things like that. So we're starting to get details about this application and what it's related to, provided by Salesforce apparently. All of that can be imported into the tool. It can be brought in via API from a ServiceNow or from another CMDB, or it can be keyed in, it can be created through matrices, various ways. But the point of it is to get it all in. And once it's all in, then we can start doing things with it. So this is how the application is related to other things. We'll get, also, this one appears in a couple of business processes. It's got 3 stakeholders that play a role in it and all sorts of things like that. Then I talked about properties. So here are our generic list of properties that I showed on the screen before. Annual license cost, how much does it cost per year? Can it be demised? Yes or no, whatever. Client-facing disposition, etc., etc., etc. These things generally, and this is just a tip for if you're gathering this information, other than where it is a specific numeric value like cost per year, it's always a good idea to have a closed pick list for these things. Don't always try to avoid free text if you can. So here, for example, the only options for can this be demised, in your opinion, as the application architect, is yes, no, or I don't know. No, you can't put in, I would, but I think Fred might be working with it down the road still on something else. And I've seen people doing that. It's the trouble with gathering stuff in spreadsheets is people can put anything in spreadsheets. How often is it used? For example, again, this is about doing the homework first, thinking through what values make sense in here, and then you can say, how do they contribute to measuring the application? And I'll show you how we do that a bit later on with an example called a time chart. There's other ways of doing it as well, like a 6R, and there are other ways of plotting them out, but it's a fairly standard technique. So this list on the left is what are the labels on the boxes where we can put stuff about this application, and the list on the right is what are the actual values for this application. So if I go into another app, those values will be different. If I go into Actimize, for example, those values, for a start, it has a much bigger model because it's connected to a lot more things. And in here we've got, so although that's long text here, for example, it's still a pick list. How is access to data and functions managed? There are some fixed options that can be selected from. But you see that the financial elements are completely different and various other things. Okay. All right, so what are we going to look at next? So that's the details of a basic application, how an application is represented in the repository. The other thing I wanted to show you just real quick is a thing called a business capability model, which we will use as part of the application rationalization demo. Now, that's a bit of a leap to go from a technology thing or a typically technology construct like an application straight into business capabilities. And some of you are thinking, what is this guy talking about? The reason I want to show you a business capability model is a business capability model is an on-the-page picture of what a business does, business on a page. That's really important for portfolio rationalization because then you can do things like saying, how do my applications affect my business on a page? How are they reflected across my business on a page? Where do they appear across this? So that's the reason we're going to do this. And I will just very quickly go in here and we will create a new one of these things. And I will call it PC webinar. I will save and model that, and then I will create a picture. A little bit easier than doing it in Visio because all I need to do here is go into my business capabilities, drag it across, let go, tell the system to draw the picture for me. So, picture of boxes in boxes. Would have taken me a little longer to draw each box individually. All that's showing me is some fundamental things that my business does. Why is this relevant to application portfolio rationalization? I hear you ask. I will show you. I'm going to save my model. I'm going to go into what's called heat map mode. And then I'm going to say, show me by clicking this little I button, what I know about this business capability called action item definition. I know it is supported by 12 applications. And I could have imported this, I could have got it through crowdsourcing, and we'll look at that stuff in a minute. I know that goal definition is supported by 4 applications, etc., etc., and I can do that on any of these. So that's useful data that's immediately available to you. What we really want to know, though, in order to start rationalizing applications, because this is now saying we've gathered the raw information about our applications, or what use is that to us? Why do I care that these things are all connected to each other? Why do I care that I've gathered all these properties and things? It's because you can start comparing them to each other and you can start looking at them in context. So with this model that we've just created, we can go to a heat map and we can say, show me a count. There's other things I can do as well and do all of those things, but I want to show a count of the applications that are related to these business capabilities. And if there are 1 or 2, I'll have it green because that's good. If there are 3 or 5, I'll explain why it's good in a second. If there are 6 to 10, I want that to be probably, that's fairly bad. It will make that an orangey color. If there are more than 10, then I definitely want to know about it. And I won't worry about it. I could put in a 0 category or whatever, but I know this data has everything joined up. One click of the button, and that's now immediately showing me where I have what's called functional redundancy. And that's one of the first things you look for in application portfolio rationalization is, where do I have overlap? Where do I have too many applications that are potentially, and note I said potentially, because this is not a guarantee of it, this is a blunt instrument, this is a first look, but that are potentially doing the same thing and therefore are candidates for being demised. So the ones that are lit up in red are the problem children. These are the ones we want to look at first. The ones in brown, sort of orangey, nasty color, they are the next ones we should look at. But if we look at some of these bright green ones, there's only, you see there's a little number there. If I zoom that in, that shows there's only 2 applications that do, or that contributes to plan obsolescence. There's only one that does policy termination, for example. If I click on the I button, I will see the only one doing that is Eloqua. So first sort of piece of intelligence from that is, it's unlikely I can demise Eloqua, even before I look at whether it's built on bad technology. Now, if it's built on technology which is causing me a genuine risk, then I need to look at this another way around, which we can do, because it's going to potentially hurt that business capability because the only thing that's supporting it is on a bad technology. But if we look at some of these that have much bigger lists, on 13 doing objective definition, for example, in there we can see Actimize, Chatter, those things we're looking at. So let's say, for example, we have been told by the bosses that they want to demise DDA, whatever DDA is. They want to get rid of that. What we can then do is say, okay, we know it's one of 13 things that supports objective definition, right here, this red one. If I go back to the heat map, and now I turn it into a dynamic heat map, and I go to my list of applications, and I choose DDA, what we can now say is, where else is this used in my organization? This is the second fundamental part of portfolio rationalization, and it's called strategic fit. So the first view was called functional redundancy. This view is called strategic fit. So what this one is showing is still using the same colors, where the red means more than 10 and the sort of nasty yellowy green means between 3 and 5. These are the 5 places across my business where DDA is used. It's one of 13 things in objective definition, which is why that's red. It's one of 3 in message dissemination. It's one of 3 here as well, one of 4 here. So those 2 different views together, you see how many different applications are trying to achieve the same business goal. That was the functional redundancy. And how widely spread is any particular application. And I can obviously switch this around to be looking from any point of view. I can go to Compass software and see where is that. That's not used anywhere on this. It may be used in another part, one of the other areas of the business capability model. If I pick Actimize, which we saw was connected to everything, that's all over the place. So no way we're going to unplug that easily. Bot services, less so. So yeah, that's how you can slice this data up. And I just wanted to give you a little sort of starter view of one of the things you can do with this data once you have it. Functional redundancy view and strategic fit view. What we haven't talked about so far is how you compare applications with each other, and we're going to do that a little bit later on. But this is foundational stuff, so I wanted to share that first. Okay, so we'll switch back into the slides and carry on. What have we looked at so far? So again, started with the end in mind. You have to think about why we are wanting to rationalize the application portfolio. Is it because we want to purely save money? Because if it's purely about saving money, just looking at the cost of the applications is not going to cut it. Because if you look at the cost of the applications, get rid of some really expensive ones that are on old tech potentially, and leave your business capabilities vulnerable, then you will hurt the bigger picture. That's the value of seeing that strategic fit view. Set up the structure. What are the boxes called? What are we going to put in them? How do we join these things together? What are we going to do with it? Business models. I showed one example of a very quick business model, which was that business capability model. Other examples would be things like value streams. You could show a flow of value across an organization in the chevrons across the page model. We'll have a look at one of those if we have time, depending on how the rest of the thing goes, but I'm sure some of you have seen value stream models before. Again, you can highlight those based on, are there a lot of different applications trying to achieve the same value stage? Have you got a big spread of where applications are used in your business process models? Or you can flip it around and take an information view. client that we worked with quite a lot over the last few years, everything was about master data management and information, and they were driving it all from that. And they wanted to know, do we have the right applications in the right place at the right level of sophistication and resilience and regulatory compliance to be able to process these fundamental information concepts and information objects that are vital to our business. So you can look at it various ways around, and all those business models can be used consistently in the tool. They can be related to applications, and then you can ask all these same questions and heap at them. And we talked about gathering an inventory of applications and the ways of doing that, importing them, bringing them in through an API, bringing them in through crowdsourced surveys. And again, we'll have a look at those. Okay, so far. All right, so what can we do with all of this? When you've got it all in there, what value is this going to give us? We talked about modeling against business capabilities, against value streams. That will take you so far. That will show you a couple of dimensions of which applications you can potentially demise or you should be potentially investing in. Modeling them against portfolios and other dimensions. That's the thing we're going to look at next, and that's talking about how we use bubble charts, scatter charts, time charts, those sort of things, and looking at groups of applications, not by a business lens, not by an information lens, but in and of themselves, looking at their technologies. All of these areas are really, really important. And all of these contribute to saying what an application's disposition is. A mistake I've seen people making a lot in this space is starting with a disposition, saying, these are the 17 applications I'm going to demise. Why are you going to demise them? Is it because they're just too expensive? That could be a valid reason, but it shouldn't be a start point. You should let the science and the system bring you to the disposition conclusion. All of these inputs should play into that, into what should the disposition be. It can't be something you start with. And then all of this, once you've done all of this, once you've got a list of, these are my 400 applications that are candidates for demise, and I've compared them to each other and said which one's going to give me the biggest bang for the buck, that's still just a plan. It's not actually removing any of those applications from data centers. It's not actually moving any of them to the cloud. It's not consolidating vendors. It's just a plan to do that. All of that would then form input into technology and business roadmaps. And that's where, certainly from UMT360's point of view, that's where we have this sort of strong continuous feedback loop between architecture and and strategy execution, where we can push these findings and these groupings of applications and this work that needs to be done, this definition of gaps, push that through into the strategy execution side of our world and say, now we can create projects to actually do this. We can create stubs of projects, we can create epics, we can create whatever your execution mechanism is, doesn't matter. We're just pushing through to there. This is the work that needs to be done to achieve this. And I talked briefly at the beginning about the difference between application portfolio rationalization and application portfolio management. Application portfolio management is the broader, holistic, sort of continuous picture of you do the rationalization, that's then your new baseline, and then you continuously work on applications, continue to introduce applications to your organization, continue to demise them through projects, upgrade them, whatever you do, and you're constantly doing this. You may go through another portfolio rationalization exercise in the future. Some organizations we've seen do it on an annual basis, but it becomes more of a sort of health check, more of going out and having people attest to the fact that these applications still do what they said they did a year ago. They still have these same scores on those various different criteria we showed. They still have the same associations to their business capabilities that they support and the information they deal with and the regulatory compliance level and all these sort of things. But it becomes an ongoing, repeating thing. Okay, so I've talked about that stuff. Let me show you a little bit more of that. Apologies, try again. All right, so we're back in Enterprise Connect now. We were looking at an individual application. I'll just pick any one. Have a look at whatever NetSuite is. Turn that off. We don't need that anymore. and actually go and look at an application. All right, so we had connections to lots of other things, and we had values here. And if you've got 30 applications like we've got in this little demo data set, you can just go in and type these things in. If you've got 3,000 or 5,000 or 20,000 applications, not so easy to have your lead architect go in and do this. You can federate it out across various people doing it, but by far the more efficient way of doing this, once you've got your nice list of questions that accurately reflect what information you want to gather and everybody's agreed that, you can actually send that out to the world and you can say, let's crowdsource this from all of the application owners. And the way we do that is through a survey. So if I show you a bit of detail of what a banking application health survey looks like. This is just a test version of it. You set up a survey with an object name, you can ask questions, is the application name correct? If it's not, what should it be? All of this data comes through from those questions that you set up, so it's all joined up, all goes into here, very easy, and then you simply distribute the survey, send it out to the audience, and what that looks like is you go in here and you can see here's a couple that have been sent to my colleague Mr. Vassilotti at UMT 360, the date on which they were sent, the date he responded, his responses then get pulled into the system, and that becomes the baseline for that application once that is sort of ticked off and agreed. And what we found is, just give you a typical example with a medium-sized oil company we worked with doing this. We were able to survey, I think it was about 1,100 application owners, 950 of them responded, which we said was enough to make the threshold for it to be statistically viable. They responded within 10 days or however long the survey was set up to be, and we were getting intelligence out of it the next day after that information was in. So because it's a lot of people doing a small amount of work, that's obviously the whole idea behind crowdsourcing, makes it very easy and very consistently easy to get this information into the system and then be able to use it. So once it's in, looking at the application scores, which we were talking about, let's go into our standard reports here and show you what one of these looks like. So what I've done here is gathered information about those scores. So the questions we were asking, can it be demised? Yes, no, or don't know. Is it client facing? Yes, no, or don't know. Whatever those may have been, all those lists, we translate those into numerical values. So if you've got something, for example, that was the response could be critical, high, medium, low, and don't care, we would score those as 100%, 75%, 50%, 25%, and 0. All of those then get combined for each application to allow the system to plot those applications against each other. So this is a big graph here. This is showing everything in the whole of the US banking organization, for example. But if I cut that down to say just what supports one particular business capability that is of interest to me, I'm interested in action item definition or strategy definition, let's say, so or the two of them, so I'm looking at it for both, and I just want to see my current state, then you can see this is where all the applications plot. And this is a thing called a time graph. So the top left is the T, that's tolerate. So these are things that are technically good, they're not hurting, but they're not of value to the business. There's only one of those, and it's called real estate monitoring up there. The I over here, this is invest. These are the high flyers. These are the things that, according to this analysis only, be very clear about that, according to this analysis of the applications against each other, these are the ones that we recommend investing in. Now, you would then add to that the other two dimensions we looked at of the strategic fit and the functional redundancy. And when you bring those things together, that will then, they'll all play into these scores. And then the size of the bubbles on here is saying how much they currently cost. So, for example, this medallia is $150,000 a year. It's got a business score of 80% and it's got a tech score of 87.5%. Makes it a very good candidate. Down here, we get the M quadrant, which is migrate. So these are things that are important to the business, but they're built on older technology or non-compliant technology, or they have poorer security review scores, because that was one of the things that I said I was interested in, security review. And that, again, here it says it contributes to the true there, it contributes to both business value and technical value. So it plays into both of those. So anything down in this quadrant are the ones that you want to consider for migration. And then these poor guys down in the bottom left, business doesn't care about them so much. They're not of high business value and they're on old technology or poor technology platforms. These are most likely for the chop, unless we find that they are the only thing supporting some critical part of the business, which is where the other pictures we did before come into it. So all those things come together. Now, if I change that from current state to target state, you'll see that some of these have moved, some of them have stayed where they are, some of them have been removed. And you can slice and dice this data in any way you wish. Some of these things, if I were to go back to all business capabilities, for example, you'll see we've got different viewpoints. In a complex organization, it's not enough to just say application A supports this business capability, because it may support this business capability in South America, but it doesn't support it in North America. There's a different one that does that. And that's what this whole business up here about context is about. You can divide the whole business up by different units or different parts of the business. It could be geographies, it could be product lines, it could be lines of business, whatever it needs to be. The point there is that this information can be very complex, so you have to look at it. Again, it's all back to how you set it up to start with. Do the homework first in order to set. All right, I talked about this before. I said portfolio rationalization is really just the beginning. When people make the conscious decision to say, I want to understand all of my applications and how they relate to my business and how they support my business and how they support my technology, that's a great thing. That makes us very happy as a company because we like helping them do it. And we like seeing people do this. It's a good thing. But it's a thing that very quickly will rot away if you don't feed and water it and care for it. So doing the portfolio rationalization on its own, great, good start. But it really needs to contribute to application portfolio management, which will then be continuously feeding off the business strategy and the strategy execution. It will be driven by the connected enterprise architecture, all of these. So, and then occasionally, as I say, you may want to come back out here and do a second portfolio rationalization as a health check, as a sort of annual pulse check, or if your organization acquires a major new business area or you merge or something else happens, a major external or internal event, that would be an opportunity or a need to have another bite at portfolio rationalization. But generally speaking, this would be a one-off exercise with a possible top-up on regular or irregular basis. In here is where the real work is done, and we'll talk about that in another whole webinar that we're going to dedicate to that. I think I just said all this stuff, so I'm getting ahead of my slides, but yeah, application portfolio management. Let's just talk about that a little bit more now and whet some appetites about that. So that is about continuously managing and monitoring the app, the tech, and it's more than that. It's the relationship to business, it's the relationship to information, it's all of those things. And that can be done a number of ways. It can be done through your architectural compliance as the architecture of the organization evolves and new projects go through their architecture review boards or checkpoints or however you do it in your organization. That then feeds into the APM world. Also attestation. Some organizations that are highly regulated will require attestation by application owners on a regular basis. And you can build a workflow around that to say every 3 months trigger that this application has to be reconfirmed, if you like, just to make sure that it's still doing exactly what it says on the tin. It's doing it in an area of the business that it is still relevant to. It's doing it in compliance with regulation, and it's doing it in a way that is maximizing the company's technology investments. And if it's not, that would then trigger a potential project, or it could trigger a potential change. And those things can be two ways around as well. It can either be, this is looking at the strategy execution part now, you're either creating and executing initiatives, projects, etc., because of changes to the architecture, like the things we just talked about, or there are other projects and programs and changes going on throughout the organization anyway, agile changes, waterfall programs, whatever they may be, and those will drive changes into the architecture. Either of those scenarios will affect the application portfolio. It's in any organization of any size that uses any sort of technology, either of those scenarios will constantly affect the application portfolio. And having a clear line of sight to them in both cases is absolutely critical. Okay, I'm going to ask you a question now, pretty similar to the last question. Mr. Hubie, if we could have the poll again, please. There you go. I love this, it's just instant, thank you. So, knowing what you now know and seeing what we've now talked about, how well do you really know your applications right now? First option is your organization has conducted a comprehensive apparatus exercise, everything we talked about and more, because this isn't the only way to do it, it's the way that we do it. It's a lot of years of experience gone into this, but there's ways you can do it. Have you done that? Have you done it once? Do you constantly do it? That's the first one, and you're seeing value out of it. You want to pay to carry on doing it, because there's no point in doing it unless you get value out of it. Second option is you've gathered most of the information as much as you can, but you're not really seeing value out of gathering that information in and of itself, other than you can put your hand on your heart and say, I have all my applications in one place. Third option is you've got a good idea where to find this information. You know it's in lots of You know it's in lots of different architecture models across the organization. You know it's in application inventories. You know it's in SharePoint. You know it's in ServiceNow or wherever else. But you haven't really had a chance to, or had the inclination to, or had mandate to go out and actually do anything with that, pull it together and use it for something useful. And then the fourth option is, yeah, seems like a good idea. Maybe we should talk about this, because let's just have a look at it. All right, what do people think about that? Poll results. Okay, so a few people have done it already, that's good to know. Then we've got a fairly good split between you've gathered a lot but not seeing value from it, and it's a good idea. Nobody seems to think that they really want to talk about it some more. That's because we've been talking about it constantly for the last hour. Good to know. Okay, so that is what I wanted to say to you, and thank you for sharing your time with me today. Much appreciate it. We can have a look at questions in a sec, but I'll leave you with a few next steps and things that we could do. We could show you a lot more of this software and talk to you about that. Please contact us to do that. We can help you with a rationalization assessment. We have gone to organizations and helped everything from simply setting up the questions and getting them going with that, right through to running an entire apparatus exercise for organizations and feeding them the results and showing them and working through the results with them. And you can come and learn about more subjects. It won't be me talking next time. It'll be somebody who is far more eloquent than I am, with a much nicer accent. This is the next webinar we're going to be running. So we've got a couple of minutes to open up for questions, and anything we don't get through now, obviously we can respond to you. One second. So how did we do the initial capability mapping? Well, that capability map that you saw in that example was one of the Business Architecture Guild's standard or reference models. And as partners of the Business Architecture Guild, we are licensed to use those models, and we can provide them to customers who are also members of the Guild. So that's a place to start from. We also have models of our own that we have worked through with various different industries. We have a comprehensive banking model. We have an oil and gas model. We have various things like that. There are a lot out there. There are a lot of reference models out there. So the asker of the question said that they're starting portfolio management from scratch manually while working out the full set of requirements, and that's a huge shift in operating model and responsibility for product owners. What have other companies seen with the acceptance of the level of detailed tracking? That is a really interesting point, because one of the first things that we found when we started doing this as sort of regular engagements is you get three camps of application owners and product owners that you're talking to. You get the first ones that see the value of doing this and are all in. They want to see how their world fits into the bigger world. Then you get the folks that don't quite get it, but they think it's probably a good idea because everybody's doing it. And then you get people that actively do not want this, because this is all data driven. It's not at all emotive. There's no bias to it at all, and it exposes things. It exposes fiefdoms in organizations. It exposes applications that are sitting there in a way in some small facility somewhere out in the Outer Hebrides because one person is still using it. and it's the exact opposite of what a rationalized portfolio would be. So yeah, to that point specifically about that's the experience that we've seen. I don't know if anybody else has comments they want to put in on that. But so going back to the initial capability mapping, we started from a reference business capability model. The survey that we sent out, I didn't show that level of detail of it, but the survey has the business capability model in it, and you can then say my application contributes to these areas. And we actually, in large organizations, certainly, that when we're engaged with them, we top and tail that. So we will ask it from the application owner's point of view, which business capabilities does your application support? And we will ask it from the business capability steward's point of view, what applications and what technology and what processes are used to support your business capability. And you tend to get a fairly good match there. There'll be some outliers, but that's how we top and tail that. Next question, is it built on Azure? Yes, it is, 100%. And what if we've gathered as much as we can, but need more? That's an interesting one. Well, there's various reasons that you can need more, but let's take that apart. The first half of the question, what if we've gathered as much as we can? Depends on how you've gathered it. If you mean that you've been holding meetings and pulling everybody together and Sorry, I've just seen another one come through. We've gathered our capabilities but haven't matched them to applications yet. Is that related to the previous one? Are these two part of the same question? It is. Okay, thank you, Yubi. All right, so you've gathered the capabilities. You've got the capability model, haven't yet matched them to applications. That comes back to the two-way top and tail I was talking about just now. The capability stewards or the capability owners should have an idea of which applications support the processes and the business that is part of their, or that is supported by those capabilities, and the application owners, the people you're spending the money on, either the business or the technical application owners, should know which business capabilities they contribute to. In either case, you can survey those owners if you don't want to sort of go around and beat people up with meetings over and over again. That's a problem we've often seen, is people get fatigued from this. They're fed up of being asked the same questions. What does your application do? What does blah, 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 blah. A survey is a very lightweight, very non-intrusive way of getting that information out of people at their own pace. They can do it in 15 minutes in their lunchtime or whatever it may be. And then and the point of doing everything in the repository is you're pulling this all together. It's not in a, does all the data that we show today feed back into the execution side? Absolutely. So we have the two sides of the same coin in the enterprise architecture tooling and the strategy execution tooling. It's the same, underneath it all, it's the same model. You can build your catalog of capabilities and all of these connections and all the data and everything else in 360 Enterprise Connect and feed 100% of that through to 360 Portfolio Insights. Generally, people wouldn't feed all of it through there. They'd feed the relevant stuff to the projects that are going to be executed. So the execution will certainly want to know about what you're changing and what is related to what you're changing. It might not necessarily need to know the 2, 3, 4 levels removed of what you're changing that you do need for the enterprise architecture connected enterprise side of things. But yes, it can all be fed through. Okay, not seeing any more questions, so I will give you 5 minutes of your morning, afternoon, evening, wherever in the world you are back. Thank you all for your time. Very much appreciated. Should have clicked one more to say thank you. There you go. Thank you on the screen as well. That's where to find us. And please do come back and see us next time.